friends, so I'm going to show you how you are going to start your Starry Night pictures. So you're going to do a painting or a drawing, whatever you can do. I know we all have different supplies at home. I am going to show you with the recommended supplies and talk about what you could substitute if you need to. So I am going to be recreating the background of the Starry Night. Remember, the background is what we see in the back. So the sky, we see stars, swirls, the crescent moon. So we're just recreating this very famous artwork. So I am going to use oil pastels. If you are able to paint, you will want to use oil pastels or like a crayon. So oil pastels or crayons are great for this. So I am going to go ahead and start to add some dots. And you can work on the whole paper. Notice I have a piece of cardboard. You could use newspaper or something that you might like to have some, oh, sorry, I've got a visitor kitty. That way you could put underneath so you don't get paint on your table. So I am actually going to turn this part into the moon. So I'm going to make almost like I'm making a circle, but I stop short and curve around to connect. And then I'm going to color this in, and I'm going to leave a little bit of white so that way I can go in as well with the yellow. I'm going to make a nice like yellow orange color for my moon. And then with oil pastels, it gets a little crumbly. You never want to wipe it because it'll smear. So you can like shake it off or blow it away. Just do the best you can. And then what I'm going to do is go around each of these dots and making these lines that curve around the dots. So we see in Van Gogh's painting how he has lots of these lines that show almost like movement. So nice swirls, lots of different colors happening in here with the yellows and the oranges and even some white. So you kind of just have to trust the process that yes, the white is hard to see on the paper, but once we watercolor paint on top, you can see the white. So I'm going to go around all of this and make all of my swirls, even making some of the swirls in the background. Once you're happy with your oil pastel or crayon background, then you can watercolor paint over top. Now, if you have watercolor paint like the pan watercolors, great. All I need is blue. So remember, with watercolor, you want to make sure you're using a good amount of water. So I'm just using a jar filled with water, and I'm going to wake up my blue paint by getting a little puddle of water in here. Now, if you do not have blue watercolor paint, so I'm going to paint this back and forth all the way across, then you can use some other supplies. Now, you want to make sure that you use enough water, that way you get this oil resist happening, where the paint runs right away from your oil pastel or crayon. If you have oil pastels, they're a little bit more oily, so this works a little bit better. It will still work with crayon. If yours doesn't seem to be working, it might be because either you didn't press hard enough with the crayon, so you might want to go back over your crayon lines, make sure you're really pressing, that way you get that waxy surface, or you might not be using enough water in your painting. Now, let's say you don't have any watercolor paint. If you have water-soluble markers, like Crayola markers or something like that, what you can do is color your background with marker wherever you don't have any oil pastels. And then you can actually use a wet paintbrush and paint over your markers. And it will move that marker and turn it into a watery substance, just like watercolor paint. So that is one way that you can still create a painting without having paint at home. So I'm gonna go ahead and pause and grab myself a marker. So I'm going to show you a little trick. If you have a Crayola marker, you can use this to watercolor paint with. So I finished out the rest of my Starry Night on the bottom, and unfortunately I did not hit record on my iPad, so I apologize. So I'm just gonna use a separate sheet of paper to show you what I did there. It makes beautiful watercolor. It's gonna look a little different on this paper because I'm just using really thin copy paper. So if you have anything at home that you can paint on, like white cardboard or cardstock, use a thicker paper. It will go better than just using copy paper. But I know it's hard sometimes, especially not being prepared, having art supplies at home. You might not have some of these things, but a lot of you probably have markers. So if you don't have watercolor paint, you can still watercolor paint. You will just color a little bit with a marker. You don't even have to fully color it. You'll just kind of scribble in the areas where you want some blue and then take a wet brush and spread that out. Now, because this is just the copy paper, you're still seeing that line that I made. Depending on the paper, you'll want to test it. You'll want to kind of draw in an area. So if I add a little bit of marker up here where it's dry, and then I take my wet brush and paint on top, then that's all going to spread out and you're not going to see those lines. So that's what's nice about using these markers, is that the ink will spread. So as long as you're not using a permanent marker, that ink will spread out just by using a wet brush. So even if you don't have watercolor paint, you can still make a painting with us in this way. So again, using thin copy paper like this isn't going to go so well, but if you have another art supply that you can paint on, give it a try, test it out first, make it work the best you can. If you don't have markers, you can just color in lightly with blue crayon. You do whatever you can do with the supplies that you have at home.